Highland Park Public Library, we'd like to welcome you to Library in Your Living Room. We are pleased to present Shelf Isolation, a weekly mini-series about books, culture, and what to read next. I'm Sarah, and this is your Information and Reader Services Department. In this episode, we are excited to share with you what we have been reading, watching, and or listening to during self-isolation. To begin our mini-series, I'm going to turn things over to Readers Roundtable expert and moderator, Michelle.
Thanks, Sarah. If y'all remember last time, I was talking that I was finishing up Devil in a Blue Dress. It's by Walter Mosley. It's the first book in the Easy Rawlins series. It takes place in 1940s Los Angeles. Easy Rawlins is a war veteran. He just lost his job, and that's very sad for him because, you know, he finally got his life together. He has a mortgage and a house, so now he's out of work and really looking for money. And then one day he was drinking in his friend's bar, and this mysterious man, a white man in a linen suit, said, you know, hey, I'm looking for this girl. Her name's Daphne Monet. She's a blonde white lady that likes to go into black bars. Can you help me find her and I'll give you a lot of money? And of course he says yes, because he needs to pay his mortgage. But then after that, a bunch of murders happen. It's a really great series. It's the series opening. I believe there's quite a few in the series. And it was made into a movie with Denzel Washington, which I haven't seen yet. But I really want to see it because I remember hearing a lot about it back in the day. Secondly, I did a second re-listen of David Sedaris' Calypso, which is his newest essay series that he's getting older. It's kind of about stuff that's going on with him. He has a really great sense of humor. His stories are very, very funny, and he talks a lot about his big family, and they're really great. Definitely I recommend if you like essays. He reads all of his stories, and I feel like they're really great. So I do highly recommend Calypso by David Sedaris. It was just as good the second listen as it was the first. And last but not least, I just finished the second book in a graphic novel series that I love. It's called Check Please. It's a really great graphic novel series. It is by Ngozi Ukazu. And it is about Eric Biddle, who is a former figure skater that gets drafted into a men's hockey league in college. And it talks about his life. He starts a blog where he talks about college life and getting along with his teammates, and he's a really great baker. And also he talks about how he is gay, and he talks a lot about how he comes out to his family. And it's just a really great graphic novel series. The art is really, really nice. It has really great story, lots of friendships, talks about college life, and it's really appropriate for teens if you have a teen that is looking for something good. So I really highly recommend Check Please. And that's everything that I have to talk about today. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, I'm going to start off with the first book I read. I had heard that they said it was one of those must reads, and it's called The Golden Key, and it's the debut novel by Marianne Womack. It's set in 1901 London, just after the death of Queen Victoria. And society at that time is really obsessed with contacting the dead and things. And so it's a very choppy story. It's I kind of felt like it had all these dots, but then it was sort of doing a Martha Stewart craft where a step was missing kind of thing. You had to keep flipping back going, wait, now, about this character or that character. They're set up with three characters. There's Samuel Moncrief. He's experienced a tragedy. You never really find out what it is. That's one thing that she leaves out. That's a dot that's missing. He's a college student, and he goes to visit his godfather at his country home. And there he ends up meeting Helena Watson Cisnero, who she was this outstanding student in science and things. And she kind of faked having a vision. And basically she used her detective skills to figure something out. But by doing this, then everyone thought that she was a medium and that she could basically reach out to the dead and connect loved ones with their deceased and stuff. So she lost her position in school. but she gets hired by all these wealthy people to try to contact, like I said, their dearly departed. Well, she's hired by this kind of eccentric woman, Lady Matthews, whose 3 stepdaughters a number of years before went missing. And so all of their stories, when the girls went missing, Samuel Moncrief appeared. So you never really, it's kind of eerie, it's set really nice, but it just didn't in the way that you kind of thought it would. And also, I mean, it was just so choppy, sort of like my review of it. It just kind of went back and forth, back and forth. And like I said, I had to keep going back and going, now wait, now did this person meet this person? Because it just kept jumping around. So it's interesting, but I don't know if I'd recommend it or not, but I thought I'd tell you about it. The other book that I read, which was really, really great, was The Falcon Thief. And it's by Joshua Hammer, and it's the tale of adventure, treachery, and the hunt for the perfect bird. And there's, the main character is Jeffrey Lindrum, and he basically spent his life like scaling cliffs, getting these peregrine falcon, basically any type of endangered species egg, and then selling them. And then it ties in with this detective whose name is Andy McWilliams, and he's in charge of the UK's division of catching people who are trafficking endangered species. And so there's this incident where a guy cleaning a bathroom kind of thinks it's kind of weird that this guy's got into his bathroom. He hasn't really used any towels or anything. He's been in there for a really long time. And then he finds this one red egg. And so then the story goes from there. Then they call in like these special detectives and stuff, and they come to the airport and they interview him, this guy, and he's like, oh no, I'm taking back chicken eggs in Johannesburg for my family. And they're like, he doesn't realize that these guys are experts in, identifying the eggs and stuff. And of course they realize that these are peregrine falcon eggs at the time. So anyway, that kind of follows this guy's life from this time. Like he continually gets arrested in different places like Patagonia. It's just like, it was really, really fascinating, but it also has all these other people talking about, like they arrest them and they find these men like with 3,000 eggs hidden in their bed, and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's kind of an obsession that these people have, and they just can't control themselves. A lot of it talks about some who lost their lives because they're literally scaling down cliffs to get these eggs. Wait, it was really, really good. It was a really fast read, and I really enjoyed it. And then the third one I did was Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. And at my age, I thought, what can a 30-something tell me? I've lived a life that I know everything. But anyway, I did enjoy it. Basically, her whole thing is like each chapter starts out, lies I've told myself. And then her whole point is that stop breaking promises to yourself, and that you are the only one who can control the destiny of your life. So I listened to it and I thought it was really enjoyable. Some parts of it I was past, like the child part of it, but we happened to be driving my son to college. And so I came up with this really good, I thought, really, really motivating thing to him. I said, you can put your mind to it. It's up to you. You can do anything that you want to do in your life. You can do it. So if this is what you want, you're going to do fine. And his response was, when are we going to see Lake Michigan? I enjoyed it. I got something out of it. I don't think that my son really kind of followed what I was saying, but she was interesting. And I thought it kind of made you think about, you're never too late to kind of have a goal, have a dream. Why not go for it and just try it? So those are the 3 books that I read. And now I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
Thanks, Stephanie. Let's see, another week, another Inspector Montalbano book for me, number 5. It's called Excursion to Tinder, and I can't promise that pronunciation of that city is correct, but I did try to find it on Wikipedia, and it's definitely not pronounced the way I thought and the way you would think looking at it. So anyway, it's number 5, and I think I've told you before that this series has always struck me as sort of fun, not really a serious bunch of books, just something you can read for fun, pick up, put down. And this time I'm a little surprised. There's some character development happening, I think. I'm gonna say I still recommend these. I think they're worth reading if you like mysteries, if you like Sicily, there's all sorts of stuff that would interest you. But I would recommend reading the series in order, because we're finding out more and more about the inspector as time goes on, and I think you don't want to miss out on any bit of that. Even though there are 28 books, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I'm going to keep going, but maybe not every single week. So I was in the middle of a few other books this week when one night I woke up about 2:30 and just couldn't get back to sleep. And I picked up The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, which maybe was a mistake because I was up till 4:30. I couldn't stop reading it. I couldn't put it down. It's about, I think, 2 days, maybe 3, in the life of a nurse midwife in 1918 Dublin during the flu pandemic. And she's working in a kind of a converted storeroom, working on these 3 pregnant flu patients because there's no room in the hospital for them anywhere else. And it got so much historic detail, so much medical detail. It's really absorbing. So the author began working on this book in 2018, and before we knew anything about pandemics, modern pandemics. And then she finished in early March 2020, gave it to the publisher, and the publisher tried to get it out as soon as possible because I guess there would be such current interest. So I mentioned it to a woman at the library. You might be interested in this. Oh, it's about the flu. She wasn't interested, but it's more than about a pandemic. So I highly recommend it. The characters are fictional except for one, which is a doctor named Kathleen Lynn, who is a real person. And I think there are a few books about her, which I may look up. The title comes from the medieval Italians thought of influenza, that it meant the stars were controlling you if you got this disease. They thought the illness proved that the heavens were governing their fates. That's a quote from the book. Yeah, I really liked it. And then I have another recommendation from a patron this week, somebody I was talking to on the phone about her Kindle. She said, "Have you ever read Women Rowing North?" And I said, "No, but sounds interesting." It was available on Libby. It's by Mary Pfeiffer, and I've just begun it, but it has a lot of observations on how a woman could transition from being middle-aged to older, and how, what changes and how you face things, how you make this transition easier by how mature you are, how much more you know, I guess. I'm not sure. But anyway, it looks good. So let's see. Next, we will hear from Sarah.
Thanks, Karen. And I have to absolutely agree with your recommendation of The Pull of the Stars. That's one of my favorites that I've read so far this year. I will go on with my first recommendation from Henry. My book is upside down. So, funny story, a couple weeks ago, I talked about Little Hoot, Little Pea, and Little Oink by Amy Cross Rosenthal. After I talked about that, I got an email from somebody who works in another department at the library, who it turns out is the cousin of the author. And sadly, Amy Cross Rosenthal passed away several years ago, but some of her books are still being published posthumously. And this one came out just a couple weeks ago. So I immediately put it on hold, knowing that my little vehicle lover would enjoy it. And it's great. Like her other books, there are a lot of puns. They go right over his head, but he doesn't care. He just likes watching all the trains. He thinks it's hilarious when a train sneezes and says, "ah, choo-choo." So great book if you have a vehicle lover. Also be a good back-to-school read for preschoolers. To stick with the school theme, one of the books I finished this week was the second Class Mom book. I know Michelle talked about the first one a couple weeks ago, and that reminded me that I loved it and that I needed to read the sequel. So it's You've Been Volunteered, and she reads her own audiobooks and is super snarky and sarcastic, and they're a lot of fun. Each chapter starts with an email that she is writing as the class mom to her son's classmates, and they're a lot of fun. I highly recommend that. The second book I read this week was I Was Their American Dream by Malika Gareb. It's a graphic memoir of a young woman who both of her parents are immigrants to the U.S. Her mother is an immigrant from the Philippines and her father from Egypt. And so there aren't other kids like her in her school growing up. She feels like she doesn't really fit in with all the other Filipino kids. Her parents divorced when she's pretty young, so she doesn't know a lot about her Egyptian side of the family. But I really enjoyed it. It's a humorous graphic novel or graphic memoir, and I highly recommend it. And then finally, I just finished this morning When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, which is her new thriller. She's best known for writing romance, but is branching out into thrillers. And I'm not going to tell you very much about this because I don't want to give anything away, but it's set in Brooklyn and is both like a thriller, a little bit horror, a little bit romance, and also about gentrification and police brutality. And it was really fascinating. And I'm going to be talking about this book, and Michelle and Catherine and some of our other staff will be talking about books next week at our Fall Book Buzz event, which will be a virtual Zoom event. You can sign up on our website. We'll put a link in the show notes and hear from us about some fall books and from some publishers about what's coming out. And with that, I will pass it along to Nancy.
Thank you, Sarah. This week, I pulled a book off the shelf that I had read previously in response to a researcher's query. It's called Highland Park, Illinois, Voices of the Past, the collected poems of the HP 150, HP for the sesquicentennial of the city, Persona Poetry Project, a Highland Park poetry publication. I had a question about the Lady Elgin, which sunk off the shores of Highland Park in 1860, and there's a couple of poems about it in here, but when I was flipping through it, what really caught my eye was a poem about the library. It's called The Resignation. And it's kind of funny for me too, because this woman's title was apparently the first librarian, but she was not the first librarian. And the woman, Jen Meyer, who wrote this poem, fit this into the poem. So this is a group of local authors and some interesting poems, all based on real events and real people in Highland Park. And we do have it on the shelf, and it's nice, and most of the pictures are from our collections in here as well. So that was kind of a fun thing to do. And I'm going to share my screen now because I'm going to show you a picture before I go on. See, this is actually, the woman in the middle is the first Highland Park Public Library librarian, Marston Green. And that's her sister, and I think that's their mom, Elvira, but we're not really sure. So, but some fun local poetry to enjoy if you're interested in, and some semi-fictionalization of events. And just as a sidebar, with the anniversary of the Lady Elgin, it sunk off the coast here in Lake Michigan. There used to be a lighthouse, and there was a lot of advocating to get that lighthouse in the 1850s. But then with the railroad and the Civil War coming and cuts, they turned off the lights. But the lightkeeper's family and the lightkeeper were still living in the lighthouse was as well. And so they couldn't help the people in Lady Elgin because the lights had been extinguished by order of Congress. And several people perished that night. There's a poem about it in here. And we also have several eyewitness accounts in the library, including the lighthouse keeper's daughter. So on a little bit lighter side, Ravinia, I thought I would share. This is what the fold out on the Illinois Digital Archive looks like when you open a Ravinia program. And don't be disconcerted by the lines. I was when I opened that, because if you do click it on, it'll bring up a better resolution image. So we put up some more programs, some more images, some more master classes on the Illinois Digital Archives as they're coming back from the vendors who are returning to work. But in the 20s, Prohibition is in full force, of course. So brewers like Schoenhofen, which is an historic district in Chicago now, switched to non-alcoholic beer, and they touted in their advertisements as being just as good as regular beer. And come and pick up a 6-pack of non-alcoholic beer and bring it to Ravinia. And there's lots of ads for various drinks as well as substitutes for beer. And when I was flipping through this program as well, I came across that somewhere they had Samson and Delilah, which is South Silent Opera. We don't have it, it's not on the Hoopla selections, but there's multiple copies and multiple interpretations in Alexander Street music, and you can check out from CD, including on Alexander Street, which you can live stream with your library card. Maria Callas singing these very, very dramatic arias that are part of Delilah seducing the Jewish Samson so they can destroy him. And then he destroys everything. Of course, everyone knows that story. Lastly, everyone knows probably by now, last night ABC broadcast Black Panther, the movie, in honor of the actor, Mr. Boseman, who died. Now, I have said through many superhero movies, I'm not a big fan, but we did watch it last night. We have multiple copies of the DVD at the library if you want to check them out. And it's actually very well done. And I didn't want to run out of the room, so I think that's a big compliment for me to a superhero movie. It's very well done. And so I'll pass it off to Catherine.
Thank you. The first book I'm going to talk about is My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I think we have talked about it before on Shelf Isolation, and it is worth bringing up again. I just finished listening to the audiobook. It is about two sisters. One, Corida, is a nurse. The other, Iola, is a serial killer, just like the title says. She just keeps killing her boyfriends and asking Corida to help her clean up the bodies. As you might guess, this doesn't really lead anywhere good. This is a fun thriller. It's set in Nigeria. It's a little bit gothic, and there's sort of the figure of the girl's father, who is now deceased, hanging over them. As you might guess, he was not a great guy either. It's basically just a fun read for people who like this kind of thriller. And then the other book I'm going to talk about is The Lager Queen of Minnesota by J. Ryan Straddle. This book, seems like I come across it all the time, and I've heard sort of mixed reviews of it. Some people really love it. Other people feel like they just don't get it or don't see why other people love it. But recently, a librarian that I know recommended it to a mutual friend of ours. And this is a librarian who does not work at our library, but I'm sure that her library is very nice as well. And this friend that she recommended the book to he grew up partly in Minnesota, and he loves beer, and he loved this book. And he brings it up all the time and tells me how great the book is. So I listened to the audiobook, and I loved it too. It's a Minnesota family saga focusing on sisters Edith and Helen and Edith's granddaughter Diana. And it's about the beer business. And there is quite a lot about starting breweries. And this whole book is just sort of a love song to beer and to the upper Midwest. I mean, there's just so much that I recognized family members who just sort of became estranged through no particular precipitating incident, but they just stopped talking to each other for decades. And at one point, I think I laughed the most at this, but Edith, when she gets older, she's surprised that she lived so long. She just assumed that she would drop dead in middle age like everyone else in her family. And I certainly know that feeling. It makes it kind of hard to do retirement planning. But the audiobook reader on this is great. I laughed so much. The second chapter is kind of boring, but I still loved it. And with that, I will pass it on to Lori.
Thanks, Catherine. That's a great review. Now I want to read that book. And you're right, retirement planning is very hard when you see no point in it. So this week I also read an Emma Donoghue novel that came out last year called Akin. I did not read her first one, Room, because I didn't want to. But I really enjoyed this one. This is a family story about an old, he's 79, about to turn 80, university professor, and he and his wife had no children. His wife has passed away. His sister has passed away. He himself was born in France and was sent to the United States. His father was in the United States, and his mother sent him there in 1942 when he was like 4 years old, and then she came a few years later. His grandfather had been a famous photographer. So at the beginning of the book, he is about to go back to France, back to Nice, where he was as a very young child and had not been back. And he comes across two things. One is he comes across his great nephew, his nephew's son. His nephew passed away from a drug overdose, and the boy's mother is incarcerated. The aunt from the other side, or the grandmother from the other side, passed away. So he somehow gets this 11 or 12-year-old boy thrust upon him, and he's about to go to France, so he takes the kid to France. And then he also has this small packet of photos that are kind of a puzzle, and then the rest of the book is about the two of them in France and how they're navigating their own relationship and also trying to figure out exactly what his mother was doing in France for those years. So it was really well written. I do want to read The Pull of the Stars because I had read reviews of that also. I still don't want to read Room though, so I think I'll skip that one. And the other book I've been reading is nonfiction. It's called Rising: Dispatches from the New American Shore by Elizabeth Rush. The Go Green Highland Park chapter does a book discussion every 2 or 3 months, and this was the one from last month. And Elizabeth Rush is a nature writer, and she she starts in Rhode Island where she is working. And she basically is talking about the effects of rising water levels all over, not only, in Rhode Island, the effect of the increased salinity in Maine, where bog is basically off-gassing huge amounts of methane. And it's really, really very timely. A few weeks ago, the Highland Park News even had an article about how rising Lake Michigan levels were affecting Lake Michigan shoreline in Highland Park. It's a really interesting book. She's a really good writer. It's kind of depressing, but it's very timely. And finally, I thought we would do a game. I will recommend a game, but as you know, I'm totally an analog gamer. So I've got Quirkle, which is a totally hands-on game. Sorry, our gamers are not here tonight. And there's these tiles. It's good for really any age. So the tiles have, it says ages 6 and up. So the tiles have, they're different colors and different shapes on them. And the idea is to make a set of 6, either 6 of the same color with one of each different shape, or 6 of different colors, all of the same shape. And on your table that you're playing, you're basically making a large jigsaw puzzle. It's really fun. So I highly recommend it, even if you don't follow the rules. It's a fun game. Kind of like the card game Set, if you've ever played that, but for a younger age or older like me. It kind of tickles your brain. The tiles feel good. They're wooden. Oh, I did want to say that we're not going to do shelf isolation next week, so you can review past shelf isolations if you miss us, and then be sure to tune into the Book Buzz a week from Wednesday, September 9th. And now I'm going to pass it back to Sarah.
That's it for today, folks. As always, please remember that we are all here for you. We are available for comments, questions, or concerns that you may have, and you can reach us online through Facebook at facebook.com/hplibrary, through our Twitter, which is @hplibrary, or via email at hppla@hplibrary.org. We are also now here in person via reservation. You can learn more about this on our website, which is hplibrary.org. Our music today was Carefree by Kevin MacLeod. You can find more information about this and the titles we mentioned in our show notes below. Okay, everybody, until next time, stay safe.